Okay, so this week you sent us some really interesting documents from the Conseil de Gouvernance Numérique du Maroc, all about digital trust services and electronic signatures in Morocco.
Oh, yeah.
And looking through this stuff, our goal today is to try to kind of really get to the bottom of some crucial distinctions highlighted in this material, especially around Law 4320.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one thing that really kind of jumped out at me was a sort of potential, minefield for people who are navigating digital transactions in Morocco. The Conseil actually points to misleading information that's being spread by some providers, particularly those that were kind of operating before Law 4320 came into effect. And they're kind of blurring a really important line between simple authentication certificates and, actual legally sound electronic signature solutions.
Right, right. Which could be a big problem for you, the listener, because if you're using one thinking it's the other, the legal validity of your digital transactions could be seriously compromised.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So let's just get right to it. What's the core difference between a basic certificate that confirms identity, like an authentication certificate, and a real legally recognized electronic signature under Moroccan Law 4320?
Well, think of an authentication certificate like a digital passport, right? Its sole purpose is to verify who or what something is, like when you're, logging onto a website, for example. But what's really interesting here is that its job sort of stops there, right? So it confirms identity, but it doesn't tell you anything about the integrity of a document that somebody might sign with it. It doesn't say anything about whether or not they actually intended to sign it.
Oh, I see, I see. So it's like, showing your driver's license to get into a bar, or something. It proves you're you, but it doesn't say anything about, what you've got in your pockets.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah.
So then what does constitute a genuine electronic signature under this Moroccan law?
Well, a compliant electronic signature, the way that Law 4320 really clearly defines it, is a different thing altogether. It must be created using what's called a qualified electronic signature certificate and a secure device. So that's a really key distinction, right? It's not just about identifying the person. It's about making sure that the signature is uniquely linked to them, that the data hasn't been messed with in any way since the signing, and that the signer really meant to sign.
So Law 4320 really lays all this out. It doesn't leave any ambiguity in defining what actually qualifies as a valid electronic signature solution.
Precisely. The law is very, it's very specific in defining these different trust services. And it specifically states that a simple authentication certificate, simply does not meet the requirements for a valid electronic signature solution.
Gotcha.
And, if we zoom out a little bit, I think understanding Law 4320 really shows Morocco's, kind of strategic intention to build a really strong and secure digital economy. By very clearly separating authentication from legally binding signatures, they are trying to, really cut down on fraud and encourage confidence in online transactions, which I think, really paves the way for more sophisticated digital services to take hold.
Okay, so let's dig into those key differences. What are the specific things that the law points out?
Well, the law really distinguishes them on several key points. So, first of all, a secure electronic signature, it needs a qualified certificate. And this kind of certificate, it's issued by a trusted authority, and it goes through a much stricter verification process than your typical authentication certificate. And then, secondly, it requires the use of a secure device to create the signature. And the source material, it actually gives some examples, like hardware security modules, which, think of them as really, really secure digital vaults, specifically designed to protect those really sensitive cryptographic keys,
Oh, wow.
as well as smart cards or even cryptographic USB keys.
Interesting.
And all of these, they're designed to safeguard the private key that's used for signing and really prevent any kind of unauthorized access.
Right, makes sense. So it's a much higher level of both security and verification for something that carries legal weight.
Absolutely.
And then on the flip side, the authentication certificate is much similar.
Yeah, exactly. An authentication certificate, as we've been talking about, its only job is identification. It might let you get into an online portal or a system, but it doesn't carry any real legal weight when it comes to actually signing documents.
Yeah.
It doesn't have those crucial guarantees of signer identity, document integrity, and what's called non-repudiation, which a qualified electronic signature does provide.
Non-repudiation.
Yeah, non-repudiation. Basically, it means that once you've signed a document with a qualified electronic signature, you can't really deny that you signed it.
Oh, interesting.
It provides really strong legal proof.
Okay, so you're really locked in.
Yeah.
Interesting, interesting. The document also mentions compliance requirements, and I'm kind of curious about what those are.
Yeah, absolutely. This is another really, really critical piece of the puzzle. So, for an electronic signature to be legally valid under Law 4320, it has to adhere to the standards that are set by the DGSSR. That's the Direction Générale de la Sécurité des Systèmes d'Information. So that's the Moroccan authority that's in charge of, IT security.
Okay,
And on top of that, the electronic signature service itself has to be provided by an accredited trust service provider.
I see.
And this accreditation process makes sure that the provider actually meets really stringent security and operational standards. So they're really acting as a gatekeeper, for quality and reliability.
So if a provider isn't both DGSSI compliant and accredited, their electronic signature might not actually be valid, legally.
Yeah, that's a very real risk and a significant one at that. And this really gets to the heart of why, this whole thing about some providers spreading misinformation is so concerning, right?
Right.
So it's easy to see how you could be misled by providers who are offering, a simple authentication as a legally binding electronic signature, which, as we've been saying, is really not the case. And that's exactly the kind of scam that the Conseil warned about.
Right, right. Well, let's get into the weeds on that. What are the risks to the listener and to businesses and administrations in Morocco if they believe that a simple authentication certificate is legally sufficient?
The risks are huge, especially when it comes to the legal side of things. So the Conseil de Gouvernance Numérique du Maroc, they state very clearly that a company or an administration that uses a simple authentication certificate instead of a qualified electronic signature really risks having their documents just rejected in court. Imagine, a judge invalidating important contracts or official documents because the way they were signed doesn't actually meet the legal requirements.
Yeah.
That could lead to big financial losses, and you could even lose critical legal battles.
Yeah, that's a scary thought. So this isn't just some sort of, minor technicality. It has real world legal implications.
Absolutely, yeah.
Are there any other dangers that we should be aware of?
Yeah, there's also this, this big potential for confusion about the value of electronic signatures. Some providers, maybe because they're being dishonest or they're just misinformed themselves, might mislead businesses into thinking that they're using a really robust electronic signature solution, when in reality, they're just using a basic authentication certificate, which, like we've said, has no legal standing and doesn't offer the same protections as a true electronic signature.
Right.
So a real electronic signature, it guarantees that the signer is who they say they are. It makes sure that the document hasn't been tampered with, and it's essentially impossible to forge. But relying on just an authentication certificate, you don't get any of that.
Okay, so it seems like this kind of misinformation could really damage trust in digital transactions in general.
Exactly. Yeah. And that brings us to the third major danger, and that is that it can really slow down secure digital transformation in Morocco. If businesses and administrations are working with a wrong idea of what the legal requirements actually are, then that's going to inevitably slow down the adoption of really secure and legally sound electronic transactions. It's almost like, it was the Wild West of digital signatures before Law 4320.
Right.
Where you have these providers that were offering these solutions that didn't really hold up legally. And so this law is kind of like, bringing order and trust to the whole system.
Okay, so what are some steps that our listener or businesses and administrations in Morocco in general can take to kind of combat this misinformation?
The source material actually gives some really practical advice. First of all, it really suggests subscribing to the Conseil de la Gouvernance Numérique du Maroc's website. And that's a really good way to stay updated on, all the latest developments, any clarifications, and official information about digital trust in the Moroccan market. Go straight to the source. That's always the best approach.
Yeah, smart. Get it straight from the horse's mouth, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
What else can people do?
Education. Education is really key here. The Conseil emphasizes how important it is to educate businesses and administrations on the differences between a basic authentication certificate and a qualified electronic signature. So, having workshops, sharing clear information, raising awareness, all of that can go a long way towards clearing up these misconceptions that are out there. People need to really understand what they're getting and maybe more importantly, what they're not getting.
Yeah, knowledge is power, as they say.
Exactly. And another really important step is to check, to verify the compliance of any electronic signature solutions that you're considering using with the DGSSI, and to make sure that the provider is actually accredited by the Conseil de la Gouvernance Numérique du Maroc. Don't just, take their word for it. Always ask for proof.
So, do your due diligence.
Yeah, exactly. Due diligence is absolutely key. And the Conseil also suggests asking for both technical and legal proof before you sign up for an electronic signature solution. That could mean, carefully looking at their certifications, any audit reports, and formal legal opinions that basically say, yes, this is in line with Law 4320. So don't be afraid to ask for documentation.
Yeah, don't be shy.
Yeah, ask them for their DGSSI compliance docs, their accreditation certificates, and any recent audit reports that they might have.
And the document also talks about adhering to international standards.
Yes, absolutely. So aligning with globally recognized international standards like IDAS, that's the European Union's regulation on electronic identification and trust services, as well as ISO 27001, which is for information security management, and then ETSI, which is the European Telecommunications Standards Institute. All of those can provide another layer of assurance. These standards are really well respected, and they help to ensure that both authentication and electronic signatures are legally sound and that they're trustworthy across different jurisdictions.
Okay, so to sum it all up for our listener, what's the big takeaway message from all of this?
Well, the bottom line is this. An authentication certificate is not an electronic signature, and it cannot be used as a replacement for a solution that fully complies with Law 4320. Businesses and administrations in Morocco need to be very, very wary of any information that suggests otherwise. And they should really stick to using electronic signature solutions that have been certified and approved by the DGSSI and guaranteed by the Conseil de la Gouvernance Numérique du Maroc. It's also important to remember that the Conseil itself is a non-governmental entity, and they are really focused on promoting good digital governance and protecting the integrity of digital transactions.
And the document actually provides contact info for the Conseil de Gouvernance Numérique du Maroc and Pinnacle Morocco, and it's contact at pinnacle.net. And their address is in Hey Riyadh, Rabat. And they also mention a 2025 copyright, which I guess means they're still working on this stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. They're clearly really committed to ensuring a secure and legally sound digital environment in Morocco.
So as you're listening to all of this, you might be thinking about your own digital interactions and the services that you rely on. And this deep dive into, the specifics of digital trust and electronic signatures in Morocco, it really highlights a bigger, more universal truth, and that's that it's always important to check and verify the legitimacy and the security of any digital service that you're using, no matter where you are. And maybe this has even got you thinking about, the digital signature regulations in your own region or in your industry.
Right.
It's a really vital part of ensuring trust and security in our increasingly digital world. So we hope this deep dive has given you some clarity and some useful insights from the info that you sent to us.
Yeah, me too. It's a fascinating topic.